that shit that you endorse, but you can't reinforce. Don't know the love code she tryna force, cause I can't read remorse. If you ain't speak about money, then keep it short. Better acronym. I'm cool on new niggas, they wasn't with us. They went after.
What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Swagger940 coming at you with another video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. Today we're going to be looking at some UFC 4 versus UFC 5 and also drawing some conclusions on UFC 6. Before we get into it, I want to know, what else do you want to see in UFC 6? And also, what did you think about the jump from 4 to 5? Let me know down in the comment section. First off, let's address the elephant in the room. Alright, we already know that UFC 4's graphics and character models weren't all of that, and we saw a significant increase in better models and stuff in UFC 5. I remember prior to the release of UFC 5, that was a big complaint that I saw going into the game, that the character models needed to be better and the graphics needed to be updated. In the great year 2025 and years in the past, we've grown accustomed to microtransactions being in the game. My only issue is you see that character models release under alter egos that are actually the current fighter models. For example, you can look at Dan Hooker. His character model that was released as an alter ego is his current fighter. Instead of updating the game and just allowing you to have that character for free, he expects you to pay for it. So hopefully we don't see a repeat of that type of activity, that type of greed in UFC 6. But given the nature of the business in gaming today, I do believe that I can almost guarantee that it will be the case. With that being said, I do hope that the models that are there on release are clean and look good and are up to date. If we can see a jump of graphics like we saw from 4 to 5, here from 5 to 6, that'll be lovely. I don't know how much more they can actually improve that, but for me personally, I don't think that the graphics need to be too emphasized in order for the game to be quote unquote good. Let me know if you're satisfied overall with the graphic fidelity of UFC 5 as it is, and if you aren't, how much would you want to see it increase? And if you are, does it really matter that much to you? Now, when I was going back and getting this footage and this gameplay for this video, I went and I played UFC 4, I also played some UFC 3, but you know, the online servers aren't online anymore, so I wasn't able to really get an online match for that, hence why you don't see any gameplay for it. But I did notice that the spacing in UFC 4 just felt a little bit off. I do think that they got the spacing and stuff correct in UFC 5. I do also believe that there's room for it to improve. So if they can figure out how to improve it, a change like that would be welcome. I've seen a suggestion online from other creators on YouTube and other creators on different platforms, suggesting that maybe they take the approach of like Tekken or Soul Calibur, where the characters aren't locked onto each other. I believe that this will be a good alternative or a good addition to the gameplay, because it'll give more meaning to footwork stats and footwork in general in the game. If you've been watching my content and watching these videos that I put out about UFC 6, you know that I'm all pro skill gaps, so adding more depth to the footwork and more depth to the gameplay in general, I believe will add more sustainability to the game and also keep players playing longer. Next, I kind of want to talk about the strike flow. Some things that I noticed from UFC 4 to UFC 5, especially when I first got the game and I'm learning the game, on release of UFC 5, was the changing of the uppercut buttons. So for UFC 4, it was like you had to press square and X at the same time or triangle and circle at the same time to throw uppercuts. And in UFC 5, they changed it to R1 in square or R1 in triangle, depending on what arm you want to throw. I think that this did improve the strike flow of the game. The next strike that I would like to see, or strikes that I would like to see changed and updated in this way to make the game feel better when you're putting your inputs into the remote, is the spinning attacks. To spin in UFC 5, you have to press X and circle at the same time, which is just like an awkward motion to do, especially when you're trying to load up other strikes behind it. But overall, I do think the flow of striking in UFC 4 and UFC 5 is good, and it's kind of like the bread and butter of the game. So small tweaks and small improvements to the flow and the feel of the game and the inputs of the game will make the game just feel overall better. You don't want to make it too complicated because new players coming in. So like simplifying the uppercut was one of those things where it's like, okay, you don't have to learn this quote unquote difficult combination. I think that they switched it around like that because the spinning attack is considered a more advanced technique. So they tethered a more advanced input to it. I think that a combination of different buttons on the remote will just feel better when you're trying to go and combo up. I'm sure there's people for both sides that will argue for UFC 4 striking patterns versus UFC 5 striking patterns or vice versa. But I also understand that the people that are making the game are going to want newer players to be able to adapt to the game and be able to catch on to the game. And it's not all about people that are trying to play the game at a high level. As a matter of fact, I'm sure there's more people that don't play the game at a high level or don't even attempt to play the game at a high level compared to the people that do. So obviously the target is going to be those newer players. So finding a satisfactory pattern to the combinations in the game is going to be key for keeping both parties on the game. I'd even go as far as to suggest some sort of system that allows you to just customize or even possibly just pick between the UFC 1, UFC 2, UFC 3, UFC 4, UFC 5 fighting schemes. That way you know that you're guaranteed to satisfy whoever, versus what we've seen in the past where the patterns just change and you just kind of have to learn that new pattern and that new system of striking and that new flow to the gameplay. Down in the comment section, you can let me know what flow and striking system you prefer from all the games, and if you think that the customizable striking is a valuable option or something that you would like to see. Next, I want to just talk about the overall growth of the sport of UFC and how big everything has become, and how many fighters and different people are coming from all across the world to fight in the UFC. I do think that it's important that we start to see some of these little known fighters or fighters that are just signed with the UFC. Like if you're a UFC fighter, you should be in the game in some form or fashion. I do understand that it will take work and take time to get every single fighter that we've ever that has ever been on the roster. It really doesn't make sense sometimes when we're adding alter egos of fighters that we've already had before and have already seen, and then we don't have fighters that are actually currently in the UFC. Maybe they can just put in certain fighters that have a certain record, or maybe you have to have a certain amount of fights into the UFC in order to get that contract. But with how big the sport has become, I'm sure there's no shortage of money to pay those little known fighters or those fighters that are just getting into the UFC without that name and that background and that storyline running, so that they can have some sort of presence in the game. And with that, that's going to be the video. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff, man. This has been your boy, Swagger940. Peace.
It's a new op on the block, and I'm trying to knock 'em all. Big R on standby, he's your